"You are nothing. You will never belong to this family, and your child will only bring shame." Those were the words my mother-in-law screamed as she hit me in the stomach in front of her guests. I fell hard to the floor, but instead of crying or shouting, I slowly stood up, pulled an envelope from my dress, and handed it to her without a word. She opened it. The color drained from her face. Her hands began to shake, and seconds later, she collapsed. But to understand how it all reached that moment, we need to go back 3 years, to a time when my life looked completely different. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share real-life inspired stories here every day, and I'd love it if you subscribe and support the channel. Stay with me until the end. The truth will surprise you. My name is Naomi. I'm 32, and I work as an accountant for a construction company in Atlanta. I've always lived a quiet, honest life. My parents are professors. My father teaches advanced mathematics, and my mother teaches philosophy. We lived in a small 2-bedroom condo in Decatur where books mattered more than appearances, and dinner conversations were about ideas, not money. I never dreamed of luxury. I only wanted a partner I could talk to about anything, someone who shared my values and wanted to build something real. And that's when Elijah entered my life. We met at a modern art exhibit. I overheard him excitedly explaining an abstract painting to his friend, and before I even knew it, I was smiling. Later, we ended up talking for hours over coffee. He was an architect at a well-known design firm, intelligent, thoughtful, and funny, in a quiet way. For nearly a year, everything between us felt easy. Until one evening, as we walked along the Beltline, he finally spoke about his mother. "She's difficult," he admitted. "She has strong opinions about how life should be lived, and about who belongs in it." I brushed it off. Everyone thinks their parents are complicated. I had no idea what was coming. The first time I visited her home, I realized just how much Eli had left unsaid. Calling it a house would be an understatement. It was a massive estate in Buckhead, with manicured gardens and a fountain that looked like it belonged in a European plaza. Vivian Dubois met us in what looked more like a museum than a living room. Crystal chandeliers, antique furniture, walls lined with framed artwork worth more than my entire life savings. She was elegant, perfectly styled, and emotionally distant. "So you're Naomi," she said, eyes scanning me like I was on display. When I offered my hand, she barely touched my fingers before pulling away. At dinner, every question felt less like curiosity and more like interrogation. Where did I study? A state university. What did my parents do? College professors. Where did we live? A modest condo. With every answer, her expression hardened. When Eli briefly left the room, she leaned closer. "My son had many choices. He deserves someone from the right world." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I love your son," I replied, "and I hope we can understand each other." Her smile was thin and cold. "Love is simply the beginning. Marriage requires more." On the drive home, Eli apologized again and again. He told me she just needed time. I wanted to believe him. But time didn't soften her. It sharpened her. From then on, every visit turned into a comparison, always with the same woman. Chanel Ellington, daughter of one of Vivian's friends, wealthy, elegant, international education. Everything I wasn't. "She just returned from Paris?" Vivian would say loudly during dinner, forgetting I even existed. Later, when Chanel appeared at events, Vivian exaggerated every compliment, every achievement, while subtly highlighting my flaws. "Naomi works as an accountant," she'd say as if it were something embarrassing. "And Chanel runs part of her family's luxury business. Vision, influence, class." Chanel herself was polite but distant. Beautiful, yes, but empty in conversation. Her world revolved around fashion, destinations, and status. Vivian worshipped money, power, appearances. She owned 11 high-end beauty salons across the city and loved her social reputation just as much as her business success. Magazine features, charity boards, private events. 18 months after we met, Eli proposed. We were on the rooftop of his office building, the city glowing beneath us. Naomi, he said softly, holding a small box. With you, I can breathe. I can be myself. I want to build my life with you. I said yes instantly. I just didn't know what a price that yes would demand. I loved him, and I truly believed that together we could get through anything. So when we told Vivienne Dubois about our engagement, I held on to hope. For just a second, her face twisted with something dark. But then she forced a smile. Well, congratulations, she said, her tone sharp and distant. Then she turned to her son. Elijah, I need a word with you. Alone. They disappeared into her study for nearly an hour. Even through the thick door, I could hear fragments of their raised voices. When Eli finally came back out, he looked shaken. She thinks we're rushing, he said quietly. And what did you tell her? I asked. That I love you, he replied. And that we're getting married. From that moment on, the wedding turned into something I barely recognized. Every plan we made was somehow undone. We wanted something small and meaningful. She forced extravagance. We picked a modest venue. She booked the most expensive restaurant, then canceled it the day before. We chose our own photographer. She replaced them with someone who somehow managed to leave me out of half the pictures. On the wedding day, she arrived dressed in black. She didn't smile once. She raised no glass in celebration. When guests asked how she felt, she would gently sigh and say, I just worry about my son's future. After the wedding, Eli and I lived in my small one-bedroom place. He wanted to rent something larger, but I convinced him we should save for a home instead. We both worked hard, planned carefully, and dreamed quietly. Vivienne called our apartment a cave. She showed up without warning and critiqued everything, the walls, the furniture, even my dishes. Once I walked into the bedroom and caught her going through my clothes. I was just checking how my son is living, she said casually. Then I found out I was pregnant. Eli was overjoyed. He turned into the most attentive husband overnight, making breakfast, never missing an appointment, reading everything he could about pregnancy and parenthood. When we told his mother, I expected something, even a small sign of warmth. Instead, she looked at me the way one looks at something unpleasant and unavoidable. A baby, she said slowly. In that apartment? On your incomes? Eli tried to reason with her. We'll manage. Lots of families raise children in smaller homes. Lots of families, she repeated, as if the words tasted bad. My grandchild will not grow up struggling, but with a mother like that. I wanted to react. I wanted to speak, but I stayed quiet. Eli held my shoulder tightly. Mom, stop, he said. I'm just being honest, she replied. If you'd married Chanel, you'd already be living in a custom home with a secure future. And now, you're just getting by. As my pregnancy progressed, her cruelty grew sharper. Sometimes she would give baby gifts, then laugh in front of others. Of course, these aren't the brands I imagined for my grandchild, but we must adjust to our circumstances. Then came the dinners, high society gatherings, expensive homes, public humiliation served with a smile. Naomi is very simple, she'd say sweetly. She's never even been to Europe. Can you imagine? Elijah once took her to a Caribbean resort, and she thought that was world travel. Eli defended me, always, but she was skilled. She cast herself as the hurt mother, the misunderstood woman whose son had chosen someone else over her. After every argument, it was the same performance, clutching her chest, complaining about her health, dramatically taking a pill in front of him. Eli would soften. He always did. Please, he begged me. She's still my mother. Just give her time. But time changed nothing. If anything, it made her worse. One afternoon during her visit, she forgot her phone in our apartment. A message popped up on the screen. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Chanel, darling, don't worry. This marriage won't last. Elijah will realize his mistake. Just be ready. That was enough. She wasn't just unkind. She was planning. That night, I promised myself something. I would not allow this anymore. But I also would not fight like she did. with insults and theatrics. I would be calm. I would be smarter. A week later, during another visit to her home, I passed her office. The door was slightly open. It never was. On her desk sat a file. Open, financial statements. Out of habit, I glanced. Out of instinct, I noticed the inconsistencies, numbers that didn't match, income that didn't reflect reality. My heart started racing. I took a few pictures, quietly, carefully, then walked away. Over the following days, I researched. I spoke with a lawyer, a family friend who specialized in financial law. I showed him what I had found. His conclusion was clear. If the documents were real, she was in serious legal trouble. I began collecting information silently, piece by piece. She never suspected a thing. She was too certain of her power, too confident in her name. Eli had no idea. I couldn't tell him. It would break him. But I made myself one promise. If she crossed one final line, I would not stay silent. In my 7th month, she invited us to a large event at her home, a fundraiser. She insisted it was important that we attend. I didn't want to go. I was exhausted, swollen, uncomfortable. But Eli believed her. "She's trying," he said. I wish that had been true. The house was overflowing with polished smiles and fine clothing, influential figures, wealthy guests. Vivian moved through the room like royalty. I sat quietly in my simple black maternity dress, surrounded by women wrapped in silk and diamonds. About an hour later, she approached me with 3 women beside her, all perfectly styled, all watching me like a curiosity. "Naomi, dear," she said sweetly, "come meet my closest friends, Cynthia, Margaret, Brenda." I rose slowly and offered my hand. No one took it. One of them smiled thinly. "Vivian has told us so much about you. You're from very humble roots." "My parents are professors," I replied calmly. "Oh," another sighed. "How admirable." So few people choose intellectual careers these days, though of course they're not exactly the highest paid, one of the women said with a thin smile. Vivian Dubois watched my reaction with clear satisfaction. "Naomi works as an accountant," she added smoothly, "for some construction company. Technically, Elijah could provide everything she needs, but she insists on working. Very independent." The sharp edge in her voice didn't go unnoticed. "I believe it's important for a woman to have her own income," I replied evenly. "I don't want to depend entirely on my husband." Of course," Vivian waved her hand. "Though honestly, ladies, I always imagined Elijah would marry from within our circle. I had the perfect girl in mind. Chanel, Cynthia's daughter. Remember how lovely they looked together at that fundraiser 3 years ago?" "Oh, yes," Cynthia added quickly. "And she's still single, by the way. So beautiful, so much potential." I said nothing. My fingers curled into my palm until it hurt. Vivian continued gently, as if she were sharing a sad story. "But what can one do? Youth, love, emotions. Eli didn't listen to me. And now look, a tiny apartment, tight finances, and a baby on the way. I only hope the child will be healthy, though with those genetics." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Something inside me snapped. "Vivian Dubois," I said quietly, "you've made your opinion of me clear, but don't bring my child into this." She looked at me, surprised, then pleased. "Insult?" she said sweetly. "I'm concerned. Children inherit more than looks, you know. They also inherit circumstances." The room fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. People turned to us. Eli noticed. He began walking toward us. "What's going on?" he asked when he reached us, looking between my face and his mother's. "I'm explaining reality to your wife," Vivian replied. "A child born into hardship, to a mother from a questionable background, rarely rises far." "Mom, enough," Eli said sharply, but she was beyond stopping. "You married beneath you," she snapped. "They clung to you for comfort, advantage, and status, and you were too blind to see it. And now she's bringing a child into the same kind of life. The air froze. No one moved. No one spoke. My hands trembled. My chest burned. Vivian stepped closer, her face twisted with fury. "You will never belong to this family," she hissed, "and that child of yours will—" Her arm struck out. Pain exploded through my body. I folded, clutching my stomach, and fell to the floor. Someone screamed. Eli rushed forward, but I pushed myself up before anyone could reach me. Slowly, I stood. I met her eyes. Then I reached into my dress and pulled out an envelope I had carried for weeks, waiting for one moment. "This is for you," I said quietly. "You may want to read it." She ripped it open, and as she scanned the papers, the blood drained from her face. Her hands began to shake. Inside the envelope were official notices from the authorities, documents confirming a full audit of her businesses, copies of a formal complaint describing illegal financial practices worth millions, photographs of falsified records taken directly from her office. She looked up at me, terrified. "You—" Her words failed. The papers slipped from her fingers. She swayed and collapsed. Chaos erupted. People rushed forward. Someone called for emergency services. Her friends surrounded her in panic. Eli stared at me, stunned. I stood still with one hand resting protectively on my stomach. For the first time in years, I wasn't powerless. The medical team arrived quickly. They helped her regain consciousness. The moment her eyes opened, she searched for me. The hatred in her stare was unmistakable. They held her back as she struggled to rise. People whispered. Guests left in silence. The evening that was meant to impress the city had turned into a scandal overnight. Eli took my hand. "We're leaving." We walked out together. In the car, neither of us spoke. His hands clenched the steering wheel. Finally, what was in that envelope? I inhaled slowly. I found financial irregularities in her business. I documented them, and I reported what I saw to the authorities. He slammed the brakes and pulled over. "That's my mother," he whispered. "And she hit me," I responded. "I'm carrying our child. She crossed the line." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "That was revenge." "No," I answered. "That was protection." I looked at him steadily. I stayed silent for 3 years. I endured the humiliation. I forgave the cruelty. I swallowed everything for you. For us. But she put her hands on my child. And that is where forgiveness ends. Eli stared ahead, speechless. I could see his jaw tighten. "You should have told me," he said quietly. "And what would you have done?" I asked. "You would have asked me to forgive her again. You would have begged me to give her another chance. Eli, you've spent your whole life doing that, and she still treats people with cruelty." He turned toward me, his voice rising. "She is my mother, and I am your wife," I replied softly, placing my hand on my stomach. "This is our child. So tell me, who are you choosing? The woman who just struck your pregnant wife, or your family?" He said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and painful. I could see the battle in his eyes, the pull between who he had always been as a son and who he needed to become as a husband and father. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "Let's go home." We drove without speaking. When we arrived, he went straight to the shower. I sank onto the couch, shaking from everything I had been holding in. My phone lit up. Dozens of missed calls, all from her and from her relatives. I muted it. When Eli came out, he looked drained. He sat beside me, quiet, for a long time. "I need time to understand all of this," he said finally. "I didn't expect my life to fall apart in one night." "I understand," I whispered. "But I don't regret what I did. If I had to choose again, I would do the same. Protecting your family is not wrong, even when it's painful." That night, we lay on opposite sides of the bed. Sleep refused to come. I rested my hand on my stomach and felt a small movement inside. "I'll protect you," I whispered into the dark, "from anyone." The next morning, my mother called. One of the guests had recognized my parents and told them everything. "Naomi, what happened?" my mother asked, her voice trembling. I told her all of it. She listened in silence, and when I finished, she spoke with emotion. You did the right thing. No one has the right to harm a woman who is expecting a child, and what you did legally, that was not vengeance. That was standing for the truth. Eli will struggle, but he must understand his mother created this situation herself. My father came on the line afterward. I'm proud of you, he said. You were strong when it mattered most. 3 days later, officials arrived at Vivian Dubois' home. They carried documents authorizing a full search. Eli was at work. I didn't tell him. He was already in pain. The search lasted hours. Computers, files, notebooks, everything was taken. The entire procedure was documented. Vivian sat silently on the couch, no longer powerful, no longer untouchable, just small and afraid. After they left, she called Eli. He put the phone on speaker. Elijah, I need you, she said, her voice barely recognizable. Your wife betrayed me. These claims are lies. I need legal help. I need money. I can't help you, he said. How can you say that? I'm your mother. You injured my wife, and you broke the law. This is not my burden to carry. Her voice rose in panic. You're choosing her over your own mother? I'm choosing my family, he said quietly, and I'm asking you not to call again. He ended the call. I saw him shake. I walked over and wrapped my arms around him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have protected you sooner. You weren't weak, I told him gently. You were just torn. Loving someone doesn't mean saving them from consequences. The weeks that followed were brutal. Relatives flooded us with messages, blame, accusations, demands that I withdraw everything. One aunt even came to our door shouting insults through the hallway. I didn't answer. I reported the harassment. Online attacks followed. Someone shared my photo and painted me as the villain. Some supported me. Others judged me. Eli deleted all his accounts. I locked mine down as well. We disappeared. Together. I visited my doctor regularly. After what happened, fear followed me every day. But the doctor reassured me. Your baby is healthy, she said. The heartbeat is strong. But you must rest. A month later, Vivian was formally questioned. Evidence uncovered more than I ever imagined. Businesses hidden, payments disguised. Real estate passed through false structures. The scale was enormous. Her assets were frozen. She was ordered to remain in the city. And the news spread everywhere. The same people who once praised her now turned their backs. She seemed so respectable, they whispered. I knew better. She tried to reach Eli through her attorney. He refused every request. I saw how it hurt him, even when he stood firm. One night, I found him sitting alone in the kitchen, staring into darkness, a cold cup of tea in his hands. Can't sleep? I asked softly as I sat beside him. I was thinking about my mom, he said quietly, looking worn out. She wasn't always like this. When I was a kid, she was kind. My father passed away when I was 12. She was left alone and built everything herself from nothing. I think something inside her broke back then. Money and status became everything. I took his hand. Hard moments don't excuse hurting others. Many people lose someone they love and still don't become cruel. Your mother made choices. To break the law, to humiliate people, to place money above basic decency. I know, he said. I understand it logically, but she's still my mother. And you're allowed to love her, I answered. But love doesn't mean letting her destroy your life. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own family to protect her behavior. He nodded, but I could see how heavy it remained in his heart. The investigation moved forward and I was interviewed several times. I described how I found the paperwork, everything I noticed, and how I gathered proof afterward. The investigators were precise and professional. Her attorney attempted to paint me as someone acting out of bitterness, implying I had invaded her privacy and acted out of revenge. But my lawyer calmly dismantled every claim. My client discovered the documents while legally present in the home as a relative. When she recognized signs of wrongdoing, she reported them properly. No law was violated. Little by little, my fear began to fade. I realized the truth was on my side, and more importantly, Eli was on my side. He changed during those months, stronger, steadier. When coworkers whispered about his mother, he met it head-on. "She broke the law," he would say calmly. "She will answer for it. I won't defend the wrong." That honesty eventually silenced the gossip. In my 8th month, I started maternity leave. Everything was going well. Eli and I prepared a small space in our apartment for the baby, a crib, clothes, a stroller. Nothing fancy, just chosen with love. My parents came often, glowing with anticipation. At the final scan, we learned it was a girl. Eli smiled and said, "Simone," and I knew it fit perfectly. A week before my due date, the prosecution called me in. The case was ready for court, and they wanted to confirm details. Eli came with me, refusing to let me go alone. We were sitting in the office hallway when I saw her. Vivian Dubois stepped out with her lawyer. She looked like a stranger, thinner, older, drained. The confidence that once surrounded her was gone. When our eyes met, the anger in hers was sharp enough to make me instinctively shield my stomach. "Elijah," she called, her voice trembling. Eli stood. "Please," she said weakly, "make her withdraw the report. I'll do anything." "It's too late," he answered calmly. "This is already going to court." She tried again. "She can say she misunderstood." "You kept 2 sets of records," he responded firmly, "and the evidence proves it." She lunged toward us before her lawyer could stop her. "This is her fault," she shouted, pointing at me. "She ruined me." The lawyer pulled her back. "Please stop. You're damaging your own case." Eli stepped between us. "Leave," he said, his voice steady, unshakable. She froze, then turned and walked out, bent and trembling. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "She can't hurt you anymore," Eli whispered, holding me close. The questioning ended quickly. The trial date was set. Despite my condition, I told them I wanted to attend in person, if the baby allowed it. 2 days later, labor began early. The ride to the hospital felt unreal. Eli never let go of my hand. Hours passed. Pain rose and fell. Then, a cry. A daughter. Healthy. Beautiful. She was placed on my chest. Tiny, warm, perfect. "Simone," I whispered. Eli cried openly for the first time in years. My parents arrived soon after. My mother couldn't stop smiling through her tears. "She looks just like you did," she said softly. And I thought of the words that had once been thrown at me, the dark predictions. And there she was, living proof they were wrong. Eli chose not to tell his mother about Simone's birth. He wanted no emotional pressure, no guilt games. I supported him completely. The trial began a month later. I brought Simone with me because I was still nursing. My mother stayed with her outside while I testified. The courtroom was full. The case had drawn attention. Her relatives sat stiff and silent, eyes filled with resentment. I didn't look down. Vivian sat across the room, composed but fragile. The charges were read aloud, serious ones, each carrying years behind bars. First came the workers, describing payments in cash and silent instructions. Then the investigators, laying out the scheme clearly. Then, me. I stood at the witness table and swore to speak truthfully. When the prosecutor asked why I had come forward, I didn't hesitate. I met her gaze across the room. Because no one has the right to harm another person, and no one is above the law, not even family. I was protecting my family. The defendant didn't just hurt numbers on a page. She spent years belittling me, insulting me, and trying to destroy my marriage. The last straw was the night she hit me in the stomach while I was 7 months pregnant and spoke curses over my unborn child. In that moment, I understood I couldn't stay silent any longer, and I used the only lawful tool I had. Her lawyer jumped up. "Objection. The witness is just trying to excuse her actions as personal revenge." "Overruled," the judge replied calmly. "Her motivation doesn't change whether a crime was committed. Continue." The defense attorney then tried to break me apart piece by piece. I was ready. I kept my voice steady and stuck to the facts. "You entered the defendant's private office without permission," he said. I was at my mother-in-law's home as family at her invitation, I answered. Her office door was open. I noticed the papers by chance. You photographed private documents. I photographed evidence of a crime, I replied. When a citizen sees that a crime may have been committed, they have a duty to report it. That's exactly what I did. He shifted tactics several times, but there was nothing he could twist. Eventually, the judge dismissed me. I walked back out into the hallway where my mother was waiting with Simone. My daughter was peacefully sleeping in her stroller, making tiny sounds in her sleep. I lifted her into my arms and held her close. This was why I had done everything. She was my reason. The trial lasted 3 days. Expert witnesses, auditors, and former employees spoke. Piece by piece, the picture became undeniable. For years, Vivian had concealed income, redirected funds, and deprived the state of money meant for public services. At the last hearing, Vivian herself took the stand. I admit I made mistakes in managing my business, she said, her tone controlled but bitter. But I will never forgive the one who destroyed my life out of spite. That woman, she nodded toward me, wormed her way into my family, fooled my son, and ruined my business and my reputation. Now she pretends to be a hero, but I know what she truly is, cold and calculating. The judge struck his gavel. Defendant, focus on the charges. Your opinions about family matters do not concern this court. Vivian sat down again, lips pressed tightly together. The judge withdrew to deliberate. We waited nearly 2 hours. When he returned, the room fell silent. The court finds the defendant guilty of major tax violations, he announced. The sentence is 4 years in a federal minimum security facility. The defendant is also ordered to pay restitution to the government in the amount of $23 million. Her assets will remain frozen until that obligation is fulfilled. Vivian turned as pale as paper. Her relatives jumped up, protesting loudly. Security moved in to restore order. Her lawyer leaned toward her, speaking urgently, but she stared straight ahead, as if no longer hearing anything. I rose. Eli slipped his arm around my shoulders. My mother began pushing Simone's stroller. Together, we walked out under the flashes of cameras and the shouts of reporters. Naomi, are you satisfied with the verdict? Do you plan to speak with your mother-in-law after her release? Do you regret what you did? I stopped for a moment and turned toward them. Justice was served, I said simply. I don't regret my actions. Then we walked away without looking back. 6 months passed. Vivian served her sentence somewhere in the region. We focused on our own lives, on our daughter, on work, on rebuilding our peace. Simone was a joyful baby, calm and bright. At 5 months she was rolling over. At 6 she could sit with support. The pediatrician said her development was excellent. Every time I saw her rosy cheeks and shining eyes, I remembered Vivian's words about my child and felt almost amused. Her curses had no weight here. Our daughter was surrounded by love. We moved into a slightly larger place, a 2-bedroom rental. It wasn't cheap, but we wanted Simone to have her own room. 1 bedroom for her, 1 for us, a small kitchen, 1 bathroom. Nothing luxurious, but it felt like a safe, fresh beginning. I switched to remote work. My company allowed me to handle reports and reviews from home, joining meetings online. It gave me the chance to stay close to Simone and still contribute financially. Eli received a promotion and began managing a department. His salary increased, but we kept our lifestyle modest, putting money aside each month. We're building our down payment, he'd say, scrolling through listings. Give it about a year and we'll be ready to buy. My parents continued to be our biggest support. My mother came by several times a week to help with Simone. My father brought groceries, repaired anything that broke, and played on the floor with his granddaughter like he was 30 years younger. We tried not to bring up Vivian's name, but sometimes she resurfaced anyway. Aunt Carol, Vivian's sister, wouldn't stop calling Eli. She's your mother, Carol insisted. You can't just leave her like this. Aunt Carol, Eli would answer, she built that life and those consequences herself. I'm not responsible for what she chose to do. She nearly hurt my wife and our baby. I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. After those calls, Eli would be quiet and withdrawn for the rest of the evening, but he never wavered. Over time, all of Vivian's former life was dismantled. Her Buckhead mansion was sold. A new couple moved in. The luxury cars went to collectors. The antiques and art were bought at auction and scattered into different homes. Her chain of salons was acquired by another company, rebranded and redesigned. Her name disappeared from the business world she used to rule. Simone turned 1. We held a small party at home, just my parents, 2 of Eli's close friends with their wives, and my childhood friend. We baked a cake, hung balloons, and bought her educational toys. Simone laughed, clapped, and tried to blow out her candle with great seriousness. "Look how beautiful she's grown," my mother said, kissing her granddaughter. "Our little star," Eli whispered, wrapping his arm around me. "We made it." "We did," I replied. But in the back of my mind, I knew one chapter still wasn't fully closed. Vivian would be released early if she qualified for parole. And then what? The answer came sooner than expected. 18 months after the verdict, when Simone was about a year and a half old, Aunt Carol called again. "Elijah, your mother is being released early. She'll need a place to stay next week." There was a long pause. Eli's fingers tightened around the phone. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" he asked. "She can't go back to her house. It's gone. She doesn't have the money to rent. She's your mother. You're going to let her end up with nowhere to go?" "She can stay with other relatives," Eli said calmly, "but not with us. That's final." Aunt Carol shouted, pleaded, accused him of heartlessness. Eli didn't argue. He simply ended the call. "Are you sure?" I asked quietly afterward. He looked at me, then at Simone sitting on the carpet stacking her blocks. "Completely sure," he said. "I won't let that influence into our daughter's life. Mom still hasn't taken responsibility for anything. She still sees herself as the victim. People who refuse to change only repeat the same damage." We spent the next week tense, expecting a visit or a confrontation. Nothing happened. No messages, no calls. Then, one sunny autumn day, Simone and I went for a walk in the park near our apartment. The trees were golden, leaves crunching softly under our feet. Simone was running along the path, picking up acorns and laughing. As I watched her, I noticed someone sitting alone on a bench. It was Vivian. She was almost unrecognizable, thinner, hunched, wearing a worn jacket and faded jeans. Her hair was short and gray. Her once flawless face was now deeply lined. The polished, untouchable woman from Buckhead was gone. Our eyes met. She stood up slowly and took a step toward us. "Naomi," she said. I stopped, instinctively drawing Simone closer. My daughter pressed herself against my leg, sensing my unease. Vivian's eyes moved to Simone with an almost hungry sorrow. "Is that my granddaughter?" "No," I replied. "She's my daughter." "I tried calling Elijah," she said. "He won't answer. I went to your building and the doorman wouldn't let me in." "He did the right thing," I replied calmly. Vivian took another step forward. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I just want to see her. She's part of me." "You gave up that right," I answered quietly. "The moment you raised your hand against me while I was pregnant and spoke such cruel words about my child." Her face twisted. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. "You were thinking," I said. "You always thought carefully about the impact of your actions. You wanted to hurt me, and you knew exactly how. Now you're facing the results of those choices. That isn't cruelty. That's consequence." "Justice?" Her voice cracked and grew wild. "Is it justice that I lost everything? My home, my business, my name? That I lived for a year like a criminal?" "You broke the law for years," I said quietly. "Because of you!" she shouted. People nearby turned to stare. "If you hadn't come into his life, Eli would have married properly. He would have had a future." Simone flinched and began to cry. I lifted her into my arms and held her close. "Step away from us now," I said firmly. "Or what?" she sneered. "You'll destroy me again?" "I will protect my child by any means allowed," I answered. "If you don't leave, I will call for help." She stared at me in silence. Fury and emptiness mixed in her eyes. Then she turned sharply and walked away, bent and dragging her feet. I stood there comforting my daughter, shaking. This wasn't victory, it was only necessity. That night I told Eli everything. He turned pale. "She's searching for us." We sat together in silence. Then he said, "I need to see her one last time, to end this." 3 days later, we met at a small cafe downtown. Simone stayed with my parents. Vivian was already there, a cold cup in front of her. When she saw Eli, hope flickered across her face. "My son." Eli sat straight. "We're here to talk once. Only once." She reached for him. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I was afraid of losing you." "You lost me when you hurt my wife," Eli said evenly. "When you betrayed the law, when you chose cruelty." She looked at me sharply. "You poisoned him against me." "No," I replied. "Your actions did." Her voice softened. "I have nowhere to go, no money. I sleep in a corner at my sister's place. Eli, help me." "I will help responsibly," he said. "I'll send money for rent for a short time, but you will not enter our lives again." "And my granddaughter?" "No." His voice didn't shake. "She will grow without fear and without manipulation." She went white. "You're taking my blood from me." "You gave that up yourself," Eli said, "the moment you raised your hand against my wife and spoke hate about my child." He stood. "I'll send you what you need to start again, but from here forward, you walk alone." He took my hand and led me out. Behind us, she called his name. He didn't look back. Outside, Eli crushed me into a hug. "It's over," he whispered. "We're free," I said. A year passed. Simone grew into a bright, curious little soul. She loved dancing, drawing, and bedtime stories. Eli earned another promotion. We saved quietly and lived carefully, building something real. My parents were always there, teaching Simone numbers, reading to her at night, filling our home with warmth. No more calls came. Another half-year later, we finally reached our goal. We bought our first home. A small, light 2-bedroom on the edge of the city. A park nearby. A school within walking distance. Nothing glamorous, but perfect for a family. When we received the keys, I cried. Weeks passed in paint and dust and laughter. We built every corner with our own hands. My father fixed shelves. My mother sewed curtains. Simone ran through empty rooms shouting, "This is our home!" And she was right. That night, as neighbors gathered and friends raised their glasses, Eli whispered, "We made it." We had. Without fear, without chains, without looking back. We kept our simple tradition every year, renting a small place near the ocean and spending 2 peaceful weeks by the waves. Simone adored the beach. She could spend hours building sandcastles and collecting shells as if each one were treasure. Eli's career continued to rise. He eventually became the director of the design bureau, not because of favors or family influence, but because of discipline, talent, and consistency. I was promoted too and began leading a small team at my company. We started paying extra on our mortgage, determined to close it early. One afternoon in the park, Simone suddenly asked, "Mom, why don't I have a grandma on Daddy's side? Maya has too." Eli and I exchanged a glance. We always knew this moment would arrive. "Daddy did have a mother," he said gently, "but she wasn't kind. She hurt your mom, and we decided it was safer for our family if she wasn't part of our lives." Simone thought about it quietly. "Was she mean?" "She made bad choices and didn't want to change," he answered honestly. She nodded seriously for a second, then shrugged. "That's okay. I still have Grandma Gail and Grandpa Stanley. They're the best." "Yes, they are," I smiled. "And they love you very much." She ran off to the swings, already lost in her own world. Eli squeezed my hand. "Do you think we did the right thing?" "We didn't take anything away from her," I said. "She gave it up herself. Simone is growing up without fear, without cruelty. That's what matters." We stood watching our daughter laugh as the sun slowly slipped into the horizon, painting the sky with soft gold and pink. Everything felt calm, real, earned. I leaned against him and whispered, "When your mother first met me, she said I had no future, that our child would bring shame. Now look at us, we own our home, we're doing work we're proud of, we have a daughter who shines, and she lost everything by chasing power." He smiled quietly. "Not destiny, just consequences." "She chose status over people," I said. "We chose honesty, love, and dignity." He kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong," I replied. "I just refuse to live broken." That night, after Simone fell asleep, we sat on the balcony with tea and blankets wrapped around us, talking about dreams and plans. "I want Simone to have a good education," Eli said. "Not fancy, just meaningful, so she can choose her own path." "She will," I answered, "and we'll teach her what really matters. Not wealth, but character." We watched the quiet city lights together. "Sometimes I think," he admitted, "what if you hadn't stepped in back then?" I shook my head. "Your life would have stayed heavy. Our marriage would have broken under pressure. Simone would have grown up watching hurt repeat itself." "You broke that cycle," he whispered. "I was afraid my whole life. Afraid of disappointing her. Afraid of her anger. And you weren't." "I was terrified," I confessed, "but I was more afraid that our daughter would grow up thinking pain was normal." He laced his fingers through mine. "And she won't. She's grown up seeing respect, care, and honesty. That's the greatest gift." Years passed. Simone became a confident teenager, bright, independent, and deeply aware of her worth. One evening, she sat beside me and asked quietly, "Mom? What really happened to Daddy's mom?" I knew it was time. I told her carefully, not every detail, not the worst moments, but enough for her to understand that cruelty has consequences and love must be protected. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "You were protecting your family, and protecting yourself is never wrong." And she never asked again. I looked at Eli. He smiled softly. We had raised someone strong enough to know that love never comes with fear. Sometimes I think back to the night I stood holding that envelope, the night everything changed, and I feel no guilt, only peace. Now we sit on our balcony, watching Simone laugh in the yard with friends. We are not wealthy, not famous, just happy. Eli laughs once and says, "My mom wanted me to have a huge house and powerful friends." "And what did you end up with?" I tease. He answers instantly, "Love, a real family. A home built with our own hands, a daughter growing up free. I wouldn't change a thing." We hug. We didn't just escape something painful. We built something beautiful. Somewhere else, she lives with nothing but the life she chose. She traded love for pride. We made a different choice, and here we are. Simone runs up, laughing, telling us something funny. We both wrap our arms around her and feel the world become small and safe again. This is real justice, not fantasy, not revenge, but a life where dignity wins and cruelty loses its power. Thank you for being here with me. If this story touched you, show your support by liking and subscribing. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know. I share new, true inspired stories every day. And now, 2 more stories are waiting for you on the screen.